All right, thank you all for watching the Shorts program all along together. I'm here with the filmmakers from the films in the program. So glad to have you all joining us. Welcome. I'm going to introduce them and then we'll get into conversation. So we've got Huntsville Station's Chris Filippone. Did I say it properly, Chris?
Sounded like a Chris Filippone. Yep.
Oh, Chris Filippone. Okay. And Jamie Meltzer is your co-director. We've got Imelda O'Reilly, director of Tumbling Towards Home.
Hello.
Okay. We are missing Dorothy Allen Pickard, who's the director of Material Bodies. Then we have Dan Hunt, who's director of Perfectly Frank. Welcome, Dan. And we have producer Nick Wehmeyer of The Grass is Always Greener on TV, which is directed by Matt Pizarro.
Hi.
Hey, Nick. Thank you guys all for joining. So good to see you all here. So would love to, as just an introductory question, have you share with us how you came about your subjects that are featured in your films. Let's start with Chris.
Sure. So I was originally researching film ideas around reentry programs and things like that, and had come across just in my research this bus station in Huntsville, Texas, which is the main release point for inmates, parolees throughout all across the state of Texas. And looking at images and things like that from there, I became really interested in just that space itself. And I had mentioned it to Jamie, who can follow up after me, but who had also shot there for a previous film. And in our conversations, we found that it was just a really interesting space, and Jamie had talked about the sort of surreal quality of that moment being outside of there. And it was sort of from there that we decided, hey, maybe we can, maybe this can be a film. So.
Yeah, just to add a little bit, I had been to this release center before for a previous film, and just for a few hours though, and just sort of being there and in this different context, but just sort of seeing this world, especially at the bus stop, which I just only interacted for a little bit that first time. I immediately thought this is a really interesting kind of setup for a short film, a way to explore the sort of criminal justice system through a much different, more unusual kind of lens. So yeah, I was excited when Chris also was interested in this space and that we could kind of collaborate on this together.
And then Imelda, Tumbling.
I'm originally from Ireland, and Malcolm Adams is a dear friend of mine. He's an actor, so I wanted to kind of do a project with him. So we started out initially by doing an interview, and the interview kind of snowballed into a larger story about him and his relationship with his mother and sort of overcoming the death of his mother. And he had studied acting in New York with Alan Langdon, and was flatmates with Philip Seymour Hoffman for 2 years in Park Slope. And so then the theme of grief sort of deepened, and we ended up having him talk about his relationship with Philip Seymour Hoffman and also grieving his friend. So it was sort of interesting how the film kind of unfolded into a deeper story when initially it was a story about immigration.
And Dan?
So I wasn't looking out actively looking for a subject. I'm really interested in issues surrounding anything, any queer issue, anything to do with aging, but I was not actively looking. I was still recovering from a feature documentary that I made a couple of years ago, and funding is brutal. I had vowed to myself, no, I'm not gonna make another damn film. And I was in Fort Lauderdale, middle of the day, walking by, I was going to get cupcakes or something delicious, walked by a nightclub, and the place is rocking out in the middle of the day. So I walked in, I decided, well, I'm gonna go in there. It's a place called Hunters. I walk in the door and there's, wait staff and barbacks and all these people, and everyone there is like 25 and stunning, like beautiful GQ, Vanity Fair cover, just beautiful, stunning, and young. And I walked around the corner and I saw a sign saying like go-go dancers. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, if the bar backs look like this, if they're these stunning, men and women, imagine what the go-go dancers look like. So I walked in and I walked around the corner, saw the crowd of people dancing, and I looked up where the go-go dancers are, and there's Frank.
It's Frank.
Frank is nearly 80 years old. He had dollar bills all over him. He was wearing yellow, leather shorts. And I was like, the reason why I made the film is that it was my response to him. As I looked up and I saw him, and I kind of felt like I laughed, and then I felt really shitty because it was such a ageist response. And then I realized, why can't Frank be up there? And isn't this amazing that he's revered this way? And isn't the queer community or the alternative community remarkable for carving out this space, or for Frank to demand that space? So I just had a complicated response. And then I started talking to him, and he just had this really conservative kind of Long Island Italian grandfather kind of background. It came out so late. I had to do the film. I just had to do the film.
I didn't expect that story. Let's move over to Nick.
Yeah, so we met Mark. It's the friend of a friend story. So I had a friend in college and she got a new house. I went over there. I'm going in all the bedrooms, and in one bedroom is this blueprint, and she tells me it's the blueprint of Bruce Wayne's manor. And I'm like, well, that's cool. Go in the next bedroom, it's the blueprint of the bottle from I Dream of Jeannie. And I was like, well, that's cool. And the room after room had these blueprints. I was like, who is this person? You got to tell me. She's like, oh, it's one of my mom's friends, lives in Chattanooga. He's kind of a weird guy. I didn't think anything of it. And then she mailed me the blueprint from the Addams Family, which is right there. And then Matt and I were talking, we're like, this would make an amazing subject for a documentary. And that's all we thought it would be, is, just kind of an artist profile on this guy who does these blueprints from memory on 1950s and 60s sitcoms. But, he just was just so open and vulnerable, and he really shared kind of the pain and all the love that went into these detailed drawings. And so it was this relationship that started from just seeing a blueprint to him just being vulnerable and sharing everything behind the artwork that made it so endearing to him and to us as filmmakers, and hopefully to audiences.
And we will wrap up with Lance. Please tell us about how you found your subject in The Seeker.
Sure. So I actually read about Kenneth in a newspaper, the Bangor Daily News, which is like the sort of regional newspaper of northern Maine. And I grew up in Maine. My family still lives there, and I visit them a lot, and I spend a lot of time there, although I live in New York now. And so I came across this article in the paper, and it was just, it grabbed me right away. It was a really fascinating profile, kind of went through the contours of his story and who he was. There was a photograph of him wearing his straw hat and standing in a field, and it sort of looked like a still from a Western or something like that. And so I was kind of gripped by his journey, but also by the visual and sort of poetic possibilities of the way it could be achieved in a cinematic way. So I thought, well, this could be a film. I mean, it's a great article, but this could really be a film. And so I looked him up, found a listing for his workshop, and asked if I could come by and talk to him a little bit and get to know him. And I did, and I ended up spending a day with him, just hearing his whole story and looking at all of his furniture and touring his farm. And by the end of that visit, I was pretty convinced that yes, indeed, he would be an incredible subject. And he's rather humble. He's very shy. He's very self-conscious about being put on a pedestal. A lot of that comes from Amish custom, where in many cases they don't even allow themselves to be photographed. So it took a little convincing to get him to allow some strangers onto his property to talk to him about some of the most intimate details of his life. But I think we developed a real rapport and a conversation, and he put a lot of trust and faith in me. and we kind of just took it from there and kind of just dug in and made the film.
Thank you guys. So you're in a program together because with each of your subject stories that you presented, I was struck by moments that revealed feelings of desires to connect, feelings of loneliness, of being on the outside. And I can certainly think of in each of your films particular sequences that struck me. I'd be curious to hear from each of you moments in the film where you knew that you had really captured an intimate revelation or vulnerability that your subject shared with you around those feelings. I'll start with you, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, so you guys all saw Frank at this point, so he's not a shy guy. And the first day that we shot, he literally showed up, in orange leather. I mean, he used to be an accountant in Long Island, and he showed up with like lime green suspenders, and so again, I thought it was going to be a much shorter short. So as I got to know him and we talked about his backstory, I asked him about his ex-wife and whether or not she would be willing to participate. And that to me is the moment that Opal, you were just describing. And as a documentary filmmaker, that is to me the thing that is such an incredible gift from whatever it is that's above us, where you get to witness truth happening. It just comes out. It may be what someone says, or it may just be the way someone looks, or the way that they cry, or the way that they laugh at someone. But it's those moments that are just, that's it. Like that's the stuff. And for me, it happened. We went to Long Island, and his wife made us spaghetti and meatballs, spaghetti and sauce, 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 you gotta have some sauce. And so really traditional Italian meal. And then we have this discussion, and it was the first time that Lucille had ever said the word gay in front of Frank. And there was a lot of tension between the two of them, and you could feel it, but there was also something that just cut right through all of it too, is that this incredible bond and this love and this bittersweet moment. So it was a really complex moment, but gorgeous, and again, it's just that truth that you just can't deny.
Yeah, the stuff that great docs are made of.
Yeah.
Let's go to you, Imelda.
So Malcolm, about a year after we started making the film, there's some animation in the film which kind of took a bit longer to complete. And I collaborated with an animator, Demarius Thompson. And Malcolm had confided to me that his dad had a home movie of him when he was a child from Ireland in the 70s. So he sort of slowly handed over the home movie and said that I could use most of it except for the parts where one of his sisters felt like she was overweight and she didn't want me to include her on a beach in her bathing suit. So we started putting that footage together. And then Malcolm and I were texting, because he was in Ireland, I was in New York, on, iChat. And he started revealing more stories to me about his relationship with his mother. And it turned out which he didn't reveal in the initial interview. And it turned out that his mother's father was an alcoholic. And he talked about how growing up with his mother, that she would go through these bouts of uncontrollable rage, and that he found that difficult to deal with. And when he was a teenager in Ireland, in the same house as his mother, this sort of came to the forefront. And he ended up, emigrating to New York. But a very poignant moment for me in the film was when Malcolm was talking about his relationship with his mother. And he said, he sort of contextualized it with her father being an alcoholic. And then he talked about his grandfather in the war, had fought in 3 wars, and how he suffered from what we would call today PTSD. And he basically admitted that when he was growing up, he had kind of hated his mother, but he had also loved her, and that he was coming to a resolution of this within himself as an adult man, but that's when she died. And for me, that was a really strong emotional truth that was revealed. And I saw his vulnerability, and it's just was kind of, you know, what real movies are made of. So it was very, very giving of him to be that vulnerable on film. And hopefully the story comes across.
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, those are circumstances which way too many people find themselves in. And to the extent you're able to share stories of those who are able to be vulnerable, yeah, you hope that it comes across and then it's able to help other people.
Yeah.
Jamie and Chris.
Yeah. So it was interesting with our film because we didn't get to spend as much time with our subjects. You know, sometimes they would be at the bus station for 30 minutes and then the bus would come, everyone would head out for that day, and that was the end of our shoot for the day. And sometimes we get a couple hours with them. So that was definitely one challenge, was sort of just building the intimacy that normally we would kind of take for granted with our documentary subjects, and, you know, we develop it over time. Yeah, I think we also expected that there would be a lot of intimacy between them, the parolees, as they were talking, and we got some of that. But I think the moments that strike me as most kind of revealing and intimate are moments that actually the camera shares with them individually. And that just sort of grew organically out of our approach. Like, it sort of became our aesthetic approach, which was just to sit with the parolees, like kind of on their own with the camera for a bit and almost do like a moving portrait. So there were a couple moments like that where really they don't say anything, but you can see a whole kind of life and set of emotions, and I think that's really powerful. And then there was also another kind of opposite moment where a guy just came over to me and Chris and just said, "I want to talk to you two," because he obviously knew we were filming and what we were doing. And that's the fellow who talks about having been in for 30 years and just sort of like breaks down in a really powerful way in front of the camera. And he, again, really sort of like needed the camera to witness that in a way. It was like he prompted that, he provoked that as much as the camera itself did. So I don't know, Chris, those two moments stand out for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think what was really interesting and what was really the challenge that Jamie raised was it was such a short period of time for each shoot day. And, you know, you don't know going into the situation if, you know, people are going to open up to you. I mean, they're just getting out of prison for, you know, as upwards of 30 years. And so, like Jamie sort of said, I mean, what we found was that our presence, for some folks allowed them the kind of space to be able to open up and be vulnerable and be, you know, emotional in front of the camera in a way that I felt that maybe they really couldn't have been inside the system. And so that's why, you know, part of making the film, you know, and capturing these moments was really amazing, but just being there in the presence of, you know, people really expressing those emotions for the first time in a long time, I mean, was just very powerful. And simultaneously too, I would say that for some folks that the presence of the camera we were a really small part of their experience. You know, they were on the phone, they were doing scratch off cards, they were doing other things. And in a way, the moment was just so much bigger for them that simultaneously we were able to kind of work and make this film, but in those sort of modes.
I have to say, for me, it was the getting the perfume. I don't know what it was that struck me as so supremely human about that moment, and how so many of the guys, you know, rounded up. And I think because it's just not, it wouldn't even be a second thought, you know, to get perfume or cologne. And I thought, oh gosh, yeah, but don't you want to smell good when you're coming? You know, it kind of unleashed so much for me, and it was just such a benign, innocuous moment, you know. Let's go to Lance.
Yeah, so I mean, Kenneth was really open and forthcoming really throughout the process. So it's hard to think of like any specific moment, but we were really kind of working with him to create every scene that you see in the film. And he was really excited to do certain things for us, like when he's cutting the grass with his scythe and that kind of thing. He's very proud of his tools and his machines, and the whole turnstile where you see the horses spinning in the barn, and they turn all of these pulleys and belts and things that create the tools for his wood shop, and he had built that all himself. So it was really nice, and I thought sweet to see how excited he was about all these pieces of equipment that he used, and he had a collection of, hand cranked drills that he used and stuff, and all this stuff from his time in the Amish. And I just thought it was really funny as a filmmaker coming in with all of our gear, and he would ask questions about our camera, and we shot on 16 millimeter, and we had these very special lenses. And he would ask questions about how everything worked, and I was asking questions about how things for him worked, and we were both kind of like gearheads, but like in a different, like in such different worlds, and that really made me feel it was just very sweet and very human. And I really also loved seeing his relationship with Annie, who is his current partner in the film, and seeing them together was like just incredibly inspiring as a couple. They met at a farmer's market, where he was selling furniture, and she does kind of fiber arts. She does knitting and things like that, and she lives off the grid in a solar powered house and raises chickens. And it just felt like, and they're both sort of like late in life, like they both had been married before and had children, and they had sort of met in this very kind of DIY hippie off the grid community in Maine. It was all just very, and again, they came from such different worlds, but I just, the culture clash and the way that people came together and shared these things with such different backgrounds, I think throughout the process was really inspiring for me. So it was a great like production process.
And finally, Nick, talk to us about maybe a sequence or moment that you thought really exemplified his desire to connect, Mark's desire to connect.
Sure. Like Chris was saying, you never know how someone's going to react when you're interviewing them on camera. And luckily, Mark's just so transparent and he's so expressive. When he's happy, you can see it in his face, you can see it in his body movements. And when he was sad, he just kind of crumbles in front of the camera. But the thing that I remember and makes me happy and true about Mark is when he's talking about his TV shows. That's what he loves. That's what he cherishes. And I mean, you can spit fire questions on an episode and he knows what number, and he knows an RCA TV black and white 20 inches. And, he knows all the details. And, that's his safety to him. And there's a point in the film where he just says he was so happy, and it just felt honest. He's been through a lot, and there's a lot of tragedy and trauma in his life, but those TV shows were such comfort to him, and knowing them. And he would say, he would like visit with these people. He knows their stories, but he's just visiting with them like you do on the front porch. And so just seeing him talk about that and just his love for the shows and characters, that's when you felt like you saw the real Mark, the happy Mark, the true Mark.
Definitely. I found his story quite unique in that there's almost, there's like a level of genius, I feel like, to the way in which he engages with these blueprints. I was curious to know, to what extent is he doing anything like that now? Like, it seemed like he had, in the film, this long period of time where he was getting a lot of public attention around it, and that seemed to wane. But I imagine he still has the impetus to exercise that inclination, I guess, in some sort of a way. Is he still doing anything like that now? I know we saw that he has a partner, but I didn't know what he was doing around this kind of work.
Well, if I had to take a guess what Mark's doing right now, he's probably on his couch watching some reruns. What he loved about those shows, and it's very true, they're set in a period of time, especially of what TV portrayed was, an idyllic family, a family where the dad teaches the son how to tie a tie, and they sit around the dinner table and they talk about what prom is going to be like. And that to him was inspirational. And so, he says in the film, like, when Roseanne came on TV and, Modern Family now, there's still love for some of the characters, but they're not as intangible, right? So he kind of fell in love with the fantasy of it. He's still selling his blueprints, his classic ones. He gets kind of one-off jobs for some TV shows that people just are really fans of. And, he digs into it and explores, but his heart and his passion is at that, kind of unattainable, idyllic American family values scenario. So yes, he's still working, but he's probably just visiting with all of his family friends on TV.
We are at 5 minutes out from the end of our session. So I just wanted to ask all of you, is there something in particular about your character stories that you hope audiences take away? Dan, you struck us with a personal moment that you had when you first met Frank, about, not being judgmental then about how he would express himself. I'm curious for each of you with your subjects, and Jamie and Chris. Of course, you're looking more at like a circumstance that they're in, but even situationally, what it is that you hope audiences take away from the time that they spend with your subjects in your films.
I think for Huntsville Station, I think we were really going for a sense of empathy, and it's an issue like criminal justice reform, and a lot of issues that documentaries cover need to be covered again and again. But I think the trick is sort of how to get people to look at them in a different way, and how to just sort of transform people's thinking just the tiniest bit. And I think that's what we're after in this film, something immersive, something that opens up a space of contemplation, that opens up a space for contradiction, where the parolees can be excited on the one hand, but very reticent and concerned about their future. And we can kind of connect to that wariness. I mean, I even think it connects to the moment that we're all in now, like this pandemic moment, in kind of interesting ways too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you really said it there, Jamie. And I think when I think of this film and I think of what an audience member might take away, I think more often, or more so than anything, I just hope they have an experience watching it, and that somehow through the experience of watching it, are able to sort of cross that boundary in some ways, even the film boundary itself, to feel that sense of empathy with the subjects and the folks in the film.
Let's go to Nick.
Yeah, it's easy when you're watching the film, and especially when you hear about the film, to write Mark off as kind of an extremist and a weirdo and just, kind of kooky. But, I think it's all relatable. I part of my life has been built off of what I saw on TV. I watch Saved by the Bell, and I look at them and I say, cool, that's how prom's supposed to be. Why is my prom not like that? And, kind of that's what Mark did. He, kind of, in a mental stance, he went to an extreme where he kind of tried to make the intangible tangible. But,
Yeah.
For me, I'm just hoping that people, look at what's forming your world. We watch TV, we watch a lot of TV, especially right now in quarantine, and all of that kind of puts together the fabric of how we view the world and how the world is supposed to be. And a lot of times that contrasts with how the world really is. So, I know it made me and Matt, the director of the film, really look at how much TV we're consuming and what we're taking from that as well.
Let's go to Imelda.
I would say that, family dysfunction can be sort of handed down from one generation to another, and that family structures are complex, and that, it's never too late to kind of find peace with the emotions within that context of, family and society. And that's sort of kind of what I would hope people would take away.
I like that. Lance, and then we'll wrap up with you, Dan.
Yeah, I think ultimately The Seeker is kind of about, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to live your life in a truthful way? And I think that it's a film that I hope asks questions and is sort of introspective and philosophical, and it, you know, it goes pretty big, you know, as big as, is God real or is he imaginary, which is, you know, almost as big as it gets. But I think, you know, I think if people can watch the film and kind of look at what their values are and the way that they're raised, and learn to question things and to challenge things and to strive to live in a way that's the most honest way you can, despite the consequences, that hopefully there's a chance at enlightenment there. Yeah.
Dan?
Oh yeah, I would say, in addition to what I said earlier, but I would say just to not to fear aging, and to approach it with a certain amount of optimism, which I think we all desperately need. I know I would say every day I wake up, I mean, under what we're going through right now is just trying to find something to look forward to. And I think of Frank, and Frank, you know, he's incredibly optimistic, and he sees, even though there was a tremendous amount of conflict with his wife, and he's alone now, and he's away from his family, but he's still looking forward, and he's still like, he got a second life. Like, he used to be an accountant from Long Island, now he's a go in Fort Lauderdale. Who knew? Like, who knew? And that means, you know, maybe I could do that, you know, in about 3 years. But be optimistic.
Look, I can't think of a better note on which to end this conversation, sitting where we all sit now in these circumstances. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you for the wonderful work that you've made and shared with us. And I want to thank you to our DocNYC audience for watching this shorts program. I hope you will join us to partake of much more of the festival. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.